Lynn, the next question that I have is actually, again, on the question of banking policy and how to address it. And this comes actually from someone who is here with us in New York, but who also frequently works out of Washington, D.C., and is someone who generally, I think, represents policies related to the institution of the presidency. And what he says is that in looking at the Obama administration's approach to dealing with our current fiscal crisis, there are some aspects of it that really are which I could only describe as perverse. The fact is that what's implicit and perhaps explicit in the Geithner plan is that it allows guaranteeing bad assets at rates above their market value. And by so doing, it simply transfers it transfers the problem to those who hold the assets. It basically, well, what he is saying, Lynn, is he says it would enable those individuals to convert those assets sooner or later to cash, and therefore it preserves the wealth of the people who basically hold these assets that are valued above their market value. But at the same time, it fails to prevent the collapse of wealth of just about everybody else. Now, what the questioner is getting at, because there's a lot more in this question, but I think we can bypass it. What he is saying is, as an interim step toward what is clearly inevitable restructuring, would it not be better, rather than allowing the Geithner plan to proceed, to actually fix the value of those bad assets, not at rates that would float, but by essentially saying we will value these bad assets at some reasonable percentage, whether that be 15 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar, 25 cents on the dollar. The questioner says if we do that, the fact is that many of the banks involved are still going to be declared insolvent, but then we can get around to the restructuring with some kind of rational basis. Do you think that this is workable, or do you think it's just completely unnecessary, that there's no point in even attempting to do this at all?
No, I think it's plausible, but you have to define what you mean by it in terms of law, because you're now getting into the area of a matter of constitutional law. And it's extremely important to us that we preserve the intention of the U.S. Constitution in any proposal we make at this point. So we have to think about constitutional law in this. Now, you have one of the features of the U.S. Constitution, or considerations taken into account. It pertains to the question of bankruptcy, the law of bankruptcy. Now, you used to have in England, what were called debtors' prisons. You still have on the German bankruptcy law, you have a debtors' prison provision built into it, which is strange to us in the United States because we're so used to ordinary bankruptcy. But a person who goes honestly bankrupt can be imprisoned in Germany for being bankrupt. And that's the debtors' prison law, which has never been removed from German law. Now, what we in the United States were fought against in particular, it was like indentured servantry and our slavery, was against this idea. So our law of bankruptcy is to provide both the obligation and the opportunity for bankruptcy in a bankrupt situation. Because we reorganize in bankruptcy in the interest, the public interest, and in the interest of the freedom and human rights of individuals. We pronounce debtors' prisons to be immoral, which is not the case in Germany, for example. Debtors' imprisonment is an immoral act, and that law should be dealt with accordingly. So therefore, yes, in this case, we go up to these guys and say, well, you guys are bankrupt. All you guys who are all with all this crap that you're trying to pass off should be put into bankruptcy. The banks involved, the financial institutions should be put into bankruptcy. At that point, when approaching this question of bankruptcy, we go back to Glass-Steagall. And Glass-Steagall was rammed through Larry Summers. Right? And at that point, they're already under the Greenspan. There were things in that direction which were driving us into bankruptcy. So therefore we say, we go back to Glass-Steagall. We take those aspects of the banking system which have to be put through bankruptcy, and we put them through bankruptcy reorganization in accord with the standard of a Glass-Steagall standard. And we go at this historically. We go from the time of repeal of Glass-Steagall under Larry Summers' scheming. We go back to that point and take that as a point of reference. Now we say, you've got a lot of bankruptcies here. Now we're going to look at the question of settling the bankruptcy at that point. In other words, as you do with your computer, you know, you go back and you reset to an earlier time when you get things screwed up. We're going to reset the computer back to the time 1999, when this bum began running loose while President Clinton was in trouble. And we say, okay, at that point, we use a Glass-Steagall standard to determine what kinds of transactions at that point do qualify for bankruptcy protection. Now, we'll take what has been piled on since then in the role of phony values. Sorry, buddy. All right, now how do we handle that? There are two ways to handle it. One way, which is what I proposed back in 2007. Freeze it and sort it out later. The alternative is, as indicated in the question, is, okay, buddy, the United States government is going to use its big fist, and it's going to tell you bums, well, settle for 15 cents on the dollar. Those will take all your trash, yeah? We'll put all this crap, and we'll put it in a bucket, and we'll say, okay, we'll give you 15 cents on the dollar for that, but not today. But we'll agree to cover 15 cents on the dollar on that, and you can name that as an asset for the future in your accounting. Yeah, we can do that. Some people might say 20%, so forth. I say 15%. We'll fight about that. But that's the alternative. The intention is to take the valid material, which meets Glass-Steagall standards of banking. Those kinds of things should receive full bankruptcy protection, maybe with some write-downs, where some of these mortgages were excessive. There were swindles already. But then we take the crap. Everything doesn't correspond to Glass-Steagall standards. We say, okay, we lump at this stuff. This crap is one lump. We'll buy it from you for 15 cents on the dollar, but not today. We'll agree to pay eventually 15 cents on the dollar. Well, we'll sign that. You'll get that. That's going to be a value you'll get some point. Now, take your money and walk. That's it. And that's the only sensible thing I can think of doing at this point. It's the alternative. Either simply say we're going to freeze that until we can sort it out, or if they really want to get nasty, we'll say, okay, you want a definite price? Okay, we'll give you one. 15 cents on the dollar.